Welcome to the Ignited Recovery Podcast, a new way forward for anyone looking for answers but feeling left out. If you've been searching for empowerment, triumph, and purpose, you've found them right here. You won't hear the same solutions, and you're not going to have any excuses to fall back on, because Ignited Recovery allows heroes to rise and become their best selves. I'm Dr. Adi Jaffe, and I can't wait to be your guide on this journey. Are you ready to become an ignited hero? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Recovery Secrets podcast. My name is Adi Jaffe, and I will be here with you today. And today, I want you to focus. And when I say focus, what I'm talking about is the fact that at its core, what I've seen is that typically when drug, alcohol, sex, gambling, food, addictions start, they're almost always about escaping from something or avoid paying attention to something that's happening in life. Now, there are a lot of the ways that this can take place, right? It can be something biological you're trying to avoid, like a physical pain or things of that nature. It can be psychological. It could be environmental, right? You do enough drugs or substances, or you engage so much in a behavior that it takes your focus away from what's happening around you. But the thing is that's important is, even though I don't know how many of you can relate, but maybe right now even take a screenshot of this as you're listening to it. And if you can, just on Instagram, tag me at Dr. Adi Jaffe or something like that, and write down what is one of those things that you've escaped when you started out. Like, how did it start for you? Because the thing is that for a lot of people that I see, by the time they get to me, by the time the end of the end, I put that in quotation marks, by the end of the addiction, a lot of times we can forget what it looked like in the beginning, like what it was that we were running away from in the beginning. And I'll give you just an example, like for my own story. I ended up a meth addict dealer in LA. That's not at all where it started, right? So in the end, when everybody looked at my life, it was very clear that I'm a drug addict and I suffer from this thing and I need rehab and I need all the fixes and all the things that an addict needs. But if you haven't read The Abstinence Myth, I'll just give you a short little piece of this one story that I talk about right in the beginning. For me, the whole trip started with drinking and social anxiety. So when I was in junior high, I asked this girl out. Up to that point, I swear I was kind of like good. I was okay with, I had self-doubt in my head and I had some weirdness around vanity and all this kind of stuff. But generally, I was pretty good. And then I kind of fell for this girl. She was the most popular girl in our class. And I mustered up all this extra psychological kind of strength. I remember I was at a friend's house actually when I did this, and it was evening, and I called her house. This is back in the day. Some of you listening right now can literally not even relate to what I'm about to share, but I had to call her landline. There was only one in her house. Cell phones did not exist when I was 14, and her dad picked up, and it was nerve-wracking enough to just ask for her. And then I walked down this little 3 to 5 minute conversation with her. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? Asked her out to a movie. I left out a little detail. She was also dating the most popular guy in our class. And so she said, I can't go to a movie with you. I have a boyfriend. I was a little devastated just by that because I gathered up all the strength. But the next day I show up in school and all of her friends know. You didn't need social media for everybody to find out everything that moment. So I show up in school, all her friends are making fun of me. It was really, whatever little social anxiety I had beforehand got super escalated, and I became a little more reclusive. I got really bothered by that piece of it. And I think I was literally 12 or 13 when that actually happened, because by the time I was 14, I'd moved to the States, and that little bit of social anxiety and feeling inadequate and all that kind of stuff just carried around with me. I don't know how many of you can relate to that. Maybe the rest of you are uber confident in who you are and always have been. I was not. And so I ended up sitting around this circle at a sleepaway camp, and the kids are passing around a handle of vodka. And I never really had vodka before, but with that social anxiety in mind, I was not going to be the kid who said, no, I'm not going to have any, when everybody else had it. Had a few swigs. It kept being passed around, had a few more. And as that warmth after the disgusting vodka, straight vodka going down my throat kind of hit me 20 minutes later, I started feeling better and better about myself, forgot about my social anxiety, actually got to hang out and fool around with one of the girls who was there, which was incredible for me because I could never put a move on anybody, anywhere, at any time. And I just kind of realized that I felt okay. Now, I'm telling you this right now. I didn't know this was all happening when I was 14 years old, but that's when it started, right? I was trying to avoid social anxiety. I just didn't know I had social anxiety, and I didn't know that alcohol would do it. And when I drank the alcohol, I didn't really realize that that's what it did for me, but that's what alcohol did for me, is it allowed me to escape that. And when I moved again, the same thing happened with weed. And when I had a really bad breakup with a girlfriend about 2 years into that, I found other drugs. And the whole thing was an attempt to continuously escape how I felt uncomfortable. And that's what I mean a little bit by it almost always starts with escaping or trying to avoid paying attention to something that's going on in your life. Let me know if that makes sense for you. Again, maybe like screenshot this, and I'd love to hear from you on Instagram or Twitter or something like that, what it was that you think you were escaping from when you started. Now, if this only happened to me, then I probably wouldn't share it here right now. But this happens over and over and over with everybody I talk to when I work with them in Ignited. And so, like, for instance, there's this woman named Melissa who came to me when the Ignited Recovery course first started. There was no Abstinence Myth book yet. None of that kind of stuff existed. And she joined, and we were talking on the course, and she had a problem with weed. I know sometimes people think that you can't get into problems with weed, but I deal with a lot of people who struggle for decades with weed. So she had a much heavier drug problem before. I think actually meth or alcohol were primary for her too, but she had kicked those, and then weed was there. And when she was working with me, and it was on this course, and she said, I can't stop the weed. And the reason I can't stop the weed is when I do it, I can't eat. I have these GI issues like irritable bowel syndrome that just destroys me. I can't work. I can't do anything when I stop smoking weed. So I have to use it. What do you do for people like that? How do you address that part of the equation when just physically I can't stop? And I said, okay, well, let's go through the course. And we do this thing in the course in the beginning where we explore the starting point. And I really just asked her about, what was the starting point? What was the first time you used? What was the first time you smoked weed? And it took her a little while to remember. And it was actually pretty crazy when she started remembering it, because what she remembered was that in junior high and high school, she was on a couple of sports teams and she was on the debate team. And even though she was good at each of those things, every time before a match and every time before a debate, she would throw up. Because, when we dug into it later, it was just this immense level of anxiety about screwing up, about fucking up on the stage or on the field. And so because she had all this anxiety, she would throw up. Literally, she told me that like her coach would know that, before you start the bus, let Melissa throw up and then she can get on the bus. Or for the debate meet, just hold on. Melissa needs to go outside to throw up and then come back. And now I want you to imagine that for a moment. I don't know how many of you have had something like that. Like I've never dealt with something that extreme in terms of my anxieties, but that does things to you, right? I talk about shame. I talk about embarrassment. I talk about a lot of that kind of stuff in the context of addiction. If you knew every single time that everybody got to wait for you on the bus for you to go throw up, talk about that escalating your social anxiety, right? So one day a friend comes up to her and says, hey, if you smoke some of this, you won't throw up before the games. And that friend was right. So she took a hit of weed and then was good. She didn't throw up. So it fixed the problem, right? It allowed her to escape this anxiety and avoid the throwing up and all these negative things that were happening. Now, again, I want you to pay attention. Just like the alcohol fixed my anxiety in the moment, weed fixed Melissa's throwing up problem. It worked. And the reason I say that is if it didn't fucking work, she wouldn't keep doing it. We don't get into problems with anything. I hate that shit when people say anything can be addictive. No. The things that can help you address, cope, avoid paying attention, or escape your pain, those can become addictive. And yes, those are different for different people, and there are a lot of different things that come along. But that's an important piece of the puzzle, right? Like drinking water doesn't make me avoid pain. If it does for somebody, then maybe they could become addicted to it. But for me, that wouldn't happen. For Melissa, it allowed her to avoid that nausea, the embarrassment, the anxiety she had before each one of those things. Now, once she realized that, once she remembered that when we were working together, we started exploring not the nausea, But the anxiety, where does that come from? What beliefs did she have? And it was all about screwing up in front of other people and looking less than, etc. I mean, some of the basic stuff that you all can understand. But the point is, when she came to me, she didn't even remember that that was part of the thing. And the reason I named this episode, or where I talked to you at the beginning, is that I need you to focus, is we all get so used to running away from stuff that we literally forget what we're running from. By the time the meth came up, the last thing I was dealing with was social anxiety. Not because I didn't still have it. I absolutely still had it, especially when I was sober, because I couldn't fucking deal with people around me and I feel less than and all that stuff. But I'd been running away from it and put together so many coping strategies in place over my life that I forgot what that was for. Melissa forgot what she was running from. And the problem is that a lot of the approaches that we currently have for addiction help actually teach us escape. So like when you go to residential treatment, what are you really doing? You're running away from your current situation to go to a different place, a place you don't use in, a place most people don't use in. If you have a lot of money, maybe you go to a really nice place, like right here by us, in Malibu, in a beautiful oceanfront estate with a pool where they take you out on horses once or twice or 3 times a week. But it's an escape, right? It's running away. Or if you're really devout in AA, and I, again, those of you who know my story, I was in AA for 3 years. All your friends are in AA. Everybody around you is in AA. You date with an AA, you marry with an AA, you only go to AA meetings. Hey, you're feeling triggered? Go to another meeting. And they tell you to stay away from people, places, and things. Which people, places, and things? The people, places, and things that irk you, that trigger you, that cause you pain, that are associated with what you had in the past. Some people move. They have an alcohol problem in one place and then they move to a completely different place. Why? Because they're running away. They're trying to run away in a different manner. But the reality is that running away will only work if you also just so happen to resolve the underlying issues. Otherwise, you're going to bring them everywhere you go. There's even a saying in AA for it, right? No matter where you go, there you are. If all you're doing is moving psychologically or physically, then the temporary avoidance is not going to do anything. That's why so many people relapse after residential treatment. You didn't fucking use in residential treatment in the first place. It's going to be easy not to use there for a whole slew of issues. We're going to talk about triggers in a different episode, but for a whole bunch of reasons, not using in residential treatment, pretty damn easy. But the problem is it's so unsuccessful when you move on later because you can't be prepared to deal with your regular life when you're somewhere else and your regular life is not happening. Unless you literally shift your new life. And some people do that, by the way. They come out to California for treatment and then they stay here for a long time, for years and years and years, because this is where their recovery is. But if you're going to go back to your old life, you're going to go back home, you better figure out what you were running away from and then fix that. Otherwise, you're going to relapse. And that's why we get these horrible 5, 10, 15% success rates in treatment. When I was studying neuroscience, you learned that real change in the brain only happens by active relearning. You can't change what you learned by just avoiding it, by not paying attention to it. And again, we'll talk about triggers more because the same thing happens here. You can only get rid of the pain that you are experiencing, that you're running away from, by focusing on it, not running away. This is in the Abstinence Myth and in Ignited Recovery, I call this the deep tissue massage version of getting help. And what I mean by that is, if you've ever gotten a massage, if you've ever gotten a massage, there's like the Swedish massage version. I'm a quarter Swedish. I have no idea why they're connected. But Swedish massage, somebody pets your back nicely, rubs your shoulders a little bit, makes you feel nice and relaxed. It feels amazing. It's really good for stress. Does shit for your muscles. Doesn't really help your muscles that well if somebody doesn't go in deep. And if you've ever had a sports massage or a deep tissue massage, you know that it is the farthest thing from relaxing. It's fucking painful. But it's going to work out the kinks and the knots, right? And so in the long term, it's better for your muscles, even though it hurts in the meantime. And the exact same thing happens here. I use this analogy a lot. We've been running away from so long. Imagine yourself literally kind of running and there's this beast chasing you. And what I'm asking people to do in Ignited Recovery is ask you to stop, turn around, and start talking to the beast. Like, for instance, one of my current favorite clients, he acts out in a lot of different ways. Sexually, with food, with alcohol. So many different ways, right? It's kind of like this multi-addiction. Now, when we started out, the sexual acting out was the first thing that he wanted to work on. So we did a lot of that, and it was online, and we found ways to address it and got it under control. And so we were actually kind of doing this daily measurement thing. I'm really big on people measuring how they're doing, and this person works with me individually, so I had him measure. And he did really well. So on a scale of 0 to 5, over the last 15 days, his score was a 1. I was like, wow, that's a real victory. And he said, yeah, but that's because we found a way to fix this thing. I've been focusing all my acting out and all the other things on the food, and he does that by throwing up, on drinking, etc. And I said, okay, cool. We'll need to start adding that into our measurement. And he really responded. He said, no, to be honest, I don't really want to go there yet. I'm happy this sex thing is doing better, and let's just kind of stay on that. And I said, that's totally cool, and we can do that if you want. But remember that what you're doing right now is you're reverting all of your running away, all your avoidance with other activities. And so if we don't measure it, if we don't pay attention to it, if we don't understand what is really going on, we'll never be able to fix it. And so there was some pushback for a couple of days, but now we're starting to focus on some of these other elements. And the reason the pushback was there was we want to run, right? We still want the pain to go away. What I'm telling you, though, is if we do this instead, and I outlined a whole bunch of steps and concepts in the book, so go read it if you haven't yet, and then definitely share a picture and tag me. But the whole point is, how do I do that, right? How do I turn around, figure out what the hell the pain is, then how do I even get okay with the fact that I have to deal with it, and then finally, how do I fix it? But that is my job. That is the job of a good practitioner, in my opinion, that is going to help you address addiction issues, is exactly this. It's not to let you run away. Because I can make you run away for years and years and years. I can make you even more scared of your addiction, make you run even farther and go to like fucking Tahiti with me and sit on an island and pretend like everything is cool and just will keep running so you never have to deal with life. But my job is actually to make the pain okay to process and to sit there, for instance, with this client, as he does it, as the discomfort comes up, and allow him to process it and help him accept it, and then guide him on how to label it so we can really understand what it is. Like I said, accept it, reduce the shame around it, and then finally address it in whatever ways we can. The magic, and this is why people get so pissed at me, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram or here, where I tell people they can beat their addiction. The magic is this. When you have nothing left to run away from, when you've addressed all of it, the early life sexual abuse, the bullying you suffered in school, the anxiety you felt physically your whole life, or the depression you struggle with. One of my other really favorite clients is really smart. So you have this self-critical voice that is almost like narrating his life in the background. When he gets okay with that voice, instead of trying to shut it down all the time, which he does daily, you won't be struggling with addiction anymore. And the reason is you're not going to need to run away to anything. I completely disagree with the idea that addiction is only a biological thing, that there are specific shifts in your brain that will not allow you to escape addiction. There are absolutely things that are biological in addiction, things like tolerance and sensitization and effects on learning processes. That's some of the stuff I did my dissertation on. There are absolutely pieces like that, and there are pieces in genetics. But you cannot ignore the environmental and the psychological piece to all of that. Because if you ignore them, we pretend somehow magically like we're back to the behavioral psychologist. Like every single thing that you do is just fate based on chemicals coming in and out of your brain. And I've got to tell you that I've seen people, and we talked about Melissa Julia, if you haven't seen her her testimonial, we'll put a link to that here. This guy John that I'm talking about here, with a lot of acting out in terms of sex, drinking, food, and things of that nature. People who had mothers who didn't want them and didn't accept them and didn't really care for them at all, and kind of just had them as an afterthought. And they never learned how to process love and how to be intimate. People who were sexually abused as children or bullied heavily. People who felt like they never belonged their whole life because they were too fat or too ugly or too stupid or whatever the story is in their head. People who've grown up with parents who were heavy drug and alcohol users and kind of learned that from the get-go. When I've been able to help people, guide people, watch them turn around and stop running away from this thing and really process it, I've seen people absolutely beat their addiction, and exactly the kind of people, by the way, who anybody else was ready to write off as a lifelong addict. Those are my favorite clients. And so not only is this possible, and I'll put the link, like I said, to Julia's testimonial and some of these other stories that we've told before, and maybe some of the Psychology Today articles when I review some of these things like the rock bottom myth and things like that. But today's title is about focus. And so I've got a really simple tip of the week. I want you to identify one area of your life that you've been running away from. And all I want you to do is spend a little time exploring what exactly about that area you've been running away from. Now, let me tell you, there's a wheel of life that we give away for anybody who wants it on the ignited.com website. It's literally the exact Ignited Wheel of Life that I use in my Ignited Recovery course. So it's kind of like the typical Wheel of Life, but I added a couple of slices in there, so it's a 10 slice instead of 8 slice Wheel of Life. Do that assessment for yourself, and then pick one category you're going to focus on. But I'm going to give you a little tip to make this easier, because you're doing this on your own, unless you do it with your therapist, and that's great too. Start simple. Don't go for something you're incredibly successful in where you don't feel like you have any work to do, and don't go for something that is so activating you don't even know if you can touch it with a 10-foot pole, because I won't be there. Nobody else will be there to really help you in the moment. So pick a middle of the road one. I don't know what that is for you. It could be your diet. It could be your finances. It could be your individual development. It could be your physical environment. Pick something that when you do it scores a middle score for you. Now, middle scores are different for different people, right? Like I can score an 8 or a 9 in a lot of things in my life. I don't really score 1 or 2s anymore. But maybe you have mostly 1 and 2s, and a 5 is like incredible. So pick a 3 or 4. And then I want you to sit there. And I want you to do a really easy meditation when you just take a deep breath in and out, and you do that for the first 30 seconds to a minute. And then you let your mind drift, and you keep trying to bring it back to this topic. What thoughts, what feelings, what ideas come up for you when that area of your life, whichever one you decided to focus on, is there? And all you've got to do, literally all you have to do is just develop awareness this time. We're not going to solve anything yet. You just need to develop awareness. This is what I call honest exploration in the Ignited Recovery method. And every time a new thought comes in, I want you to label it. Don't run away from it. Don't try to push it down. Just say, I'm thinking about the fact that I don't like the furniture in my room, or how messy it always is. Or maybe I don't like the smell of my room, or the fact that there's freaking dried up food everywhere that I just haven't thrown away. Just let it all come in. Don't run away from it. Label it. Pay attention to it. And then when you're done, take it and write as many of those things on a piece of paper. Your job for this week until next week is to take one of those categories and develop as much awareness as you can about it. And if you feel like you did so really well and you feel so good about it, go to another category. We don't have the ability to address and fix what we don't know and we haven't explored. So go and explore. Focus on the pain instead of running away from it. I hope that was helpful. I can't wait to see you next week. Please tag me with some of your insights. I love hearing either at info@ignited.com or on Instagram or Facebook and Twitter what it is that you get out of each one of these. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in to the Ignited Heroes Recovery Podcast. I really hope you found the information here useful and that we'll see you back here next week. And look, I want to make sure that this podcast is the most useful it can be for you, so please let me know by emailing info@ignited.com if there are any specific topics or questions you'd like to have addressed. As usual, if you like this episode, I would love for you to leave us a 5-star review and rating. Thanks, and see you next week.